Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Fighting the Void. Yes, I know I was just here yesterday doing a live stream about all the shenanigans going on because I just couldn't keep my mouth shut. But I didn't want to deprive you of the regularly scheduled live stream, especially since I have got my friend Paul on here. And I've been wanting to get Paul on the podcast for a while, but we are finally able to make it happen because you know what? We're both busy guys. And sometimes you just got to work to make those schedules mesh a little bit. Little bit of backstory. Um, couple summers ago now, the summer of 2019, actually.
Yeah.
Wow, it seems like longer ago than it was. I'm sure that has something to do with the news cycle. Back then the world was relatively normalish.
Yeah, by the time we got to, I think 2020, it was just the year of Tuesdays. I never knew what day it was.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But about the June, actually, of 2019, I was taking my two oldest kids. We were going to go try to hike part of the Appalachian Trail, which, if you've been following me for a while, you know that trip didn't, as far as hiking goes, it didn't turn out very well. But we did 2 days of hiking as opposed to a whole week. And the second day was retracing the steps of the first day.
A Walk in the Woods, Bill Bryson, great book.
And you know what? It was still worked out well because we wound up traveling all over the area and seeing all kinds of cool sights. And It was we successfully salvaged the trip.
Nice.
But my first night, our first night traveling away from home in Michigan, we stopped in Nashville to have dinner with a couple of other people that I knew on Twitter, including Sarah, who you might know on Twitter as Pinktastic. This guy who goes by the word Stig is in his name.
And that changes. Stig is always there, but the other
Stig is always there.
Yeah.
if you're watching, man, yeah. And he had this cool like spider. It's a motorcycle type thing.
Yeah.
It's like an inverted trike sort of. But and of course Paul was there, and we had a great dinner. We had great conversation and everything, and it was just fun for all.
Fun for all.
And like I said, ever since then, I've kind of been wanting to get Paul on. And I was like, okay, I gotta have him on, talk about just some libertarian stuff, because obviously there's always fighting about this, that, and the other thing in the libertarian world. You're not a real libertarian. No, you're not a real libertarian. And libertarians have a tendency to swing between somewhere around just people who don't like taxes but still have all of their favorite policies that they think the government should do, and like this flat out anarchism.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's a wide variety of opinions on just about everything within libertarian world, which is why everybody calls everybody not a real libertarian. Because
right.
Really, in all honesty, what is the real libertarian? It's a good question. It's a fair question.
I usually tell people I am the only real libertarian. We'll just clear that one up. Yeah,
exactly. So actually, I think that winds up being a really good spot to jump into things, Paul. Okay, so what is the real libertarian? What is libertarianism as you would define it?
So when I explain libertarianism to people, I tell them, number one, you have to understand the non-aggression principle. You don't hurt people, you don't take their stuff. Mm-hmm. And on top of that is private ownership of yourself, your body, private ownership of property, and private ownership of your labor. And so nobody else can own any of that unless you voluntarily enter into an agreement. So it doesn't matter if they've been elected. It doesn't matter if people have voted for them. Nobody has the right to come in and take your stuff. Nobody has the right to aggress against you. And that would be the crux of libertarianism. That's usually how I explain it without getting into specific policy concerns.
Well, that is a very good basic definition of what libertarianism is, more or less.
Right.
Now, of course, everybody's got different applications of those principles.
Sure.
And like you say, that's where that starts to break down.
Right. And I would say one of my main shticks on Twitter about libertarianism is yes, you are free to do a lot of things. However, I would encourage my fellow libertarians to limit, like choose to limit some of those freedoms. Like basically libertarianism, when I was listening to Ron Paul talk about libertarianism, that was the first time I heard principles of liberty that I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Back when I was I was making my journey from Republican to conservative to independent, and eventually came over to the libertarian camp.
Right.
I just always thought libertarians were people who wanted to smoke weed, shoot up, like that was it.
Right.
I didn't know the other stuff. It was just a party of vice. And then, of course, once I got in here, and so many libertarians, that is kind of their, like, that's what they wear on their sleeve, is all of the vices. And so I say it's the difference between a libertine party and a libertarian party. And I wish that we could rebrand so that we're, we don't have the hookers for liberty, drug dealers for liberty. Like, cool. Like, you have to understand, yes, I believe you have freedom, you have agency, you own yourself, you can do all that. But is it really a good idea? Is it, and so we should be, yes, we have the liberty, and no one should come in and tell us we can't do that, but that should not be connected to our political movement, where that's the, hey, come on over and you can eat shrooms with us. Like, don't make that the selling point.
Well, and I wish you had that conversation with Joe Jorgensen. Because I saw a clip of a speech that she gave in Detroit, and it was something to the effect of, wouldn't you feel better if it was, like Marlboro and whatever other big companies making meth in a factory instead of your neighbor in the garage, and it could blow up at any time? I'm like, really safe and legal meth? That's your selling point? That's your stump speech? Are you high? Like, literally, are you on meth?
Who do you think who are you trying to attract? Now, like I taught college, and she was a college professor. So when she was talking, like, I got it. I knew who she was around most of the time. And I wanted to say, that's not a big enough voting block. Yeah, your students would be like, oh, Joe Jorgensen's cool. She says I can shoot up. But that's so far down. Like, that stems from what we believe about agency. You own your body. You can do what you want to your body. Nobody else is required to pick up the pieces, though. But don't start with the drug use. That's not your starting point. Talk about agency. And there's so many better ways to go with that discussion. Yeah, that was,
I mean, it seems to me
painful
that from a strictly libertarian perspective, if somebody comes and asks you, does that mean, if let's say you're Joe, okay, and I'm a reporter asking you questions, trying to probe into your philosophy a little bit, and I'm like, well, so and she didn't give that speech. I was just, probing.
Right.
Like, so are you saying that under libertarianism, it would be okay, or it would be allowed for Marlboro to make meth and market it at Walgreens? Is, if I were a reporter, being a good reporter and probing, that would be my question.
Yeah.
Now, it seems to me the good libertarian answer would be, well, technically, yes, we would, for the federal government would not stand in the way of that. However, that doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Correct. In answering those questions, saying, well, technically, yes, that's the blip. They're just going to cut out yes. So, if someone asked me that question, I would probably answer with a question, would you go and buy meth and do it? To which more than likely they would say, no, of course I'm not going to. Okay, there you go. You don't have to if you don't want to. Well, what about the?
That's a smart future politician right there.
Yeah, like, well, what if someone else? Don't worry about them. That's not you. That's not you. They're them. They own themselves. And that idea of individual liberty, and that's when you launch off and say, we're talking about individual liberty. We're not a collective. As long as no
Right.
one's hurting them, taking their stuff. If CVS or Walgreens is not pointing a gun at your head and saying, buy the meth. If you want to do meth, you're an idiot, but sure, go ahead. I don't want to pay your dentist bill.
No, nor do I. I was supposed to say, hi, Red. I see you there in the chat, although your connection might have blipped out because I don't have the person in the counter there. But then again, I don't know how reliable that is. But anyway, okay. So one of the things that I always like that has interested me about the whole libertarian conversation.
Mm-hmm.
How far down? Well, first question is: so what would you say the proper role of the federal government is?
So, I'm going to get raked over the coals by a lot of libertarians on this one. I believe the only role of a government, the only role they have, is to make sure that my rights are not trampled on by powers foreign or domestic. Basically, it's just a court system. Everything else I want done by private, including police. I do not want police to be run by a federal or a state government.
Okay.
And basically, police would be more investigative. If someone aggresses against you or they defraud you in some kind of a contract, then basically that would be the rule of government. But with that, I don't think any of Congress should be paid. I think it should be volunteer or crowd-funded. If people want to pay them, they can. But if you take away their powers to make laws that they can then turn around and enforce at point of gun, they have too much power.
I definitely don't think that they should have the opportunities for making money that they clearly do.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, if you don't go in rich, there's a good chance you leave very rich.
Yeah.
And their salaries, while they're much higher than the median income, they are not they're not going to make you millionaires.
Right. And it's odd that someone can go in as a senator and they work for a little, $200,000 a year, and after, 20 years they've got a Martha's Vineyard home, they have something in Nantucket,
it just I smell fish. I smell fish.
Something was rotten in the state of DC. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Red actually has a good question here, and
sure.
it pertains to the police question.
Yeah.
So would police be paid for in the private sector? And if so, does this exclude poor people? If you can't pay for the police, do you still get protected by the police?
No. So it's a great question, because people always want to know about poor people. We're constantly asking about poor people, and that that goes to my point. Humans in general, as a whole, we are a kind and benevolent people. We do not like to see suffering. The entire course of human history, other than when you get some weird tyrant who gets in there, it really has been about alleviating suffering. So police would be sort of like EMS in a sense. I have a student who runs an EMS company, and that they're not publicly funded, and they make bank because hospitals contract with them. Like they find a way. The market always finds a way to make money where there's a need. So like police, firemen, if I'm going to be living in an area and I want that sort of insurance, let's say I pay, $7.99 a month, same as I would Netflix or something, and that means when my house is burning, I can call them. Or if there's a break-in or something happening, I'm going to call them up. Now, market would also provide for the person who doesn't want that. Just like if you don't have insurance and you go into a hospital, you might pay a higher price at the time, but that's just something you do. And if there's charities like, hey, here's an underfunded community, it would be in the interest of that private company to get donors to say, yeah, we'll fund you to go help these people. Like, all of it is market funded, and we already have examples of that happening already with charities and other groups where they can go out. They've got a charity wing. It's good advertising for them. People feel good. We want to give charitably. Every time there's a tornado anywhere in the world, we're dumping millions of dollars into it beyond taxes. So the police, like, I believe that market would find a way, because it's done it in every other industry. And if police were not required to be enforcing dumb laws, is your garage too close to the property line? Are you, parked longer than 3 hours downtown? They're free to actually help in areas where someone's rights are being aggressed against. And I think that a lot of it would be less intervention, like a typical 911, and would be more investigative. This happened, we're going to find who did it. And in a private market, they would have incentive to solve it, and solve it quickly.
That's fair. That seems a fair point, and clearly you put thought into this particular issue, and for good reason. It's one that I know libertarians do get asked about. I think it's only behind roads, probably.
Roads, which is great. Like, there was a Domino's Pizza that was tired of their roads being junkies. No one could find them.
Right.
So they went out and started fixing the roads, and they put their symbol on the road. So every time you drove by, oh, there's the Domino's Pizza insignia.
I'm not kidding.
There you go. Market
billboards.
Solution. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Billboards on the ground.
Barking in the background.
Yeah, that's all right. That's actually kind of a good. That's actually a good point. So long as, again, the local government allows for Domino's to say, "Hey, you can fix a few roads if you want."
Well, I mean, before government was the one building the roads, we had Route 66. Let's not forget about that. That was built by good old-fashioned hardworking Americans. Some large companies obviously invested in it. Little towns sprung up. They needed it. They wanted it. And it wasn't until government started building these massive highway systems, and we see the death of the little town. It seems like a good thing now, because I can get in my car and 13 hours later, I'm in Nashville. But at what cost? There were a lot of livelihoods that got stamped out. There's a lot of people's property that got ripped away from them because eminent domain.
Ooh, boy, do I hate that one.
Yeah, there was a lot of theft that happened just so I could be a little more convenient. And this is my biggest thing. Dang it. I want flying cars. So if we've got areas of the country that you just can't easily or cheaply build roads through, or throw the power of the Federal Reserve behind, someone's going to invent a way to get past that. Where's my flying car? I shouldn't have to wait till 2022 to get it.
Well, not to mention, I'm sorry, I've been getting promised a flying car by popular mechanics ever since the 80s.
Oh,
so
my goodness. Yeah.
I am pissed about that. And
Same.
frankly, Elon Musk needs to get on the stick and make this happen. That better be the next Tesla.
I will tell you, they are coming. They are being tested right now here in Dallas, down at DFW Airport. Yeah, they've got DFW Airport has like tons of land. I mean, huge. Area 52 is probably at DFW by now. But Uber is starting to test personal flying vehicles, so they can lift people, take them places, and they don't have to deal with traffic. And it would all be like computerized and all that jazz. I won't be the first one in it.
No, no, me neither. I've got kids, man.
I was gonna say, but someone is. I'm just scared of pain, so I have no excuse like kids. But yeah, they're gonna come. They will be here soon. But we should have had them sooner if the government hadn't built the roads.
I would love. I really hope we do get the flying cars, because by golly, if I'm gonna have self-driving cars, and eventually I wouldn't be shocked if they were mandatory. By golly, if my car's gonna drive itself, I want it to be flying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Same here.
I mean, come on. It seems like a simple enough ask. really.
Oh yeah, you would think. Come on, people.
That or I'm packing up my clan. That or I'm packing up my whole clan of gingers, and I'm going to be on I'm going to be on Starship One, heading off to Musk's Mars colony.
Right. And I'm thinking about the aesthetics. I want it to be sort of that George Eames inspired Jetsons look, that neo
Yes.
50s, 70s kind of look. Yeah, that
If it doesn't look like that, are you even a colonist on another planet?
exactly.
I mean, really.
Come on. I will wear the 3-piece suit and the skinny tie again. I'm there.
Absolutely. I don't want I don't want the inflatable bubbles like in The Martian. No,
Oh,
man.
no.
I want everything to look like an Airstream, camper.
Classic. Timeless.
That's
Love
what
it.
I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But all right, so I think and Red, yes, Pennsylvania's road sucks. Michigan's roads suck. I know you know that, Paul.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And of course everybody's like, I'm gonna fix the roads. No, you're not.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I live most of the year. I'm on long-term contract in Indiana, and I'm in
Hmm.
the Michiana area. So I'm like 11 miles from the Michigan border.
Right.
And they told me Indiana has the most miles of road of any state. And it's true. Like there are roads crisscrossing all over the place.
That just seems dumb.
It is dumb. It is. Why they built all those roads, I have no idea.
I'm sure there was a reason back in the day.
Oh, they were. Someone was just spending money like it was free. But now they have to keep it up. They have to keep all of it up, and chances are you're going to have to wait till another car passes so you can drive around the Amish buggies anyway.
Yeah, right. Now we were kind of getting in the direction of my next question, which is, how far would you say libertarian principles should go down? Like, one of the things I always wonder when I'm talking about, when I'm trying to work my way through libertarian principles, is is it strict libertarianism only at the federal level, federal and state level, or like all the way down to the local village?
So, honestly, whenever I have this discussion with people, my thing is, if someone wants to be a communist, let them. If you want to open up a commune and people come and join and sign up and you live that little Chaz Chop dream, you go right ahead. But at no point can you point a gun to their head and force them to do it. So the libertarian idea is less, and this is one of the reasons why we don't win political battles, is it is really about the idea, like it is mass liberty. You get to choose what you want to do. So
Right.
I want it from federal all the way down to as local as can be, understanding that if I'm going to a neighborhood and they say, if you're going to live in this neighborhood, like, we own this property, it's private, we've set up this neighborhood, and if you're in here, we have these socialist whatever, here's the HOA. I'm choosing to live there. I am voluntarily putting myself under those rules, and at any time I can voluntarily walk out. The problem with how federal and state work now is you don't get to voluntarily opt out, because a guy with a gun's going to come and force you to do whatever they want you to do.
Yeah. And I would say that's, I mean, you could choose to move from one state to the next, but that only does so much, because
you're trading one set of rules for the other.
Right. Yeah. And frankly, given the way that the system is currently working, for the most part, other than obvious disparities brought about by the COVID situation,
right,
the state governments are largely superfluous to me. They seem to be largely pass-throughs for the feds when it comes right down to it.
The feds.
I mean, obviously, there's differences between one state and another, and on some important differences on some important issues. But by and large, we're living under the feds' rules, no matter where you live.
Right, and that's sad. I think if I was going to have to make the Sophie's choice, do I want a strong federal government or a strong state government? I would lean more towards the state, because it's easier to escape the state than it is the country. And even as we see now, where like Texas, everybody's moving to Texas and Florida. The
Right.
city that I'm in right now, I've lived, a decade here. I came back after being away 6 months or so, and there's like new developments already just in
Just
that amount of time.
booming
Everyone
like
is moving
crazy.
here.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say that Texas is necessarily the freest state in the nation, but it's free enough that everyone who lives in a California or New York or something, like,
Oh
it's
yeah.
like Disneyland.
Well, yeah, and understandably so. I mean, if you're
Mhm.
going from California to just about anywhere, it's going to be freer. But so basically, it sounds like you got kind of the same principle that I've got when it comes to that. On a
Mhm.
municipal level, let people figure it out for themselves.
Sure.
If the town down the road wants to be a hippie commune, great.
Mhm.
If the county over wants to be, wants to be their own version of California, go for it, you retards. Um, you know, if the other one wants to go
Yeah.
for the libertarian utopia,
So,
awesome.
and the question that a lot of people will follow up is, well, what happens? You make a business, like all when you're instead of having government regulations that everyone has to follow, bar
Mhm.
none. If I wanted to open up a business in a city, I'm basically going to sign a contract with that city saying that I will abide by these rules to open up a business here. And
Mhm.
that's where you can make sure, if you want a family friendly city, then they're going to probably outlaw some porn shops
Right.
and drug whatever.
Mhm.
um, and that would be one way through voluntary contract that you could sort of control the city. um, and then if someone came in as like, well, I'm free, I'm going to open this no matter what, well, in that case you've defrauded a contract. But you can't do that if the land that the city is in is publicly owned. So that's where libertarian philosophy really stems very strongly from private property.
Mhm.
So uh, as it stands now, it would be nearly impossible to do something like that in like McKinney, where I live,
Mhm.
um, because nobody owns anything. There's no private property. We're all just paying rent to the county. And so they can come in and demand you fix whatever they want to fix, build whatever they want you to build. There's no recourse. So you have to start with private property in order to build something like that. Just so we know, I'm talking in libertarian theoretical dreamland.
Fair enough. Fair enough. There was actually a town. I don't know if it's still going or not, but it's down in Florida. I think near Naples. It was. I I can't remember the name of the town, but it might even be the name of the town might even be Ave Maria. It was built around Ave Maria University.
Okay.
It was set up by Tom Monahan, actually, the Domino's pizza guy,
Oh
oddly
yeah.
enough,
Okay. All right.
and it was at least intended to be sort of the Catholic family friendly utopia.
Okay.
Whether I think he ran into issues with the local government and everything, where they just weren't going to let him
Yeah.
do all of that, but it was essentially Tom was going to buy it, and then you know it was going. The town was essentially going to be his private property, and then people could live there as and uh, presumably pay some sort of rent. I don't know all the legal details and everything and how they would have worked out, but that
Right.
concept has at least been attempted
Yeah.
in relatively.
Yeah.
This was probably a decade ago. This is
Yeah.
that this got started, maybe even more. It's been a minute. Um,
Yeah. And I think it's a great testament to, if it were a libertarian society, truly libertarian society, the
mhm.
thing is, you would have socialist cities, and you
Yes.
would you would have cities that fit the stripe of everybody. But again, it's only places where people choose to go live. And one thing that the government, federal, state, whatever, would be on the lookout for, especially in like a communist type of city, is the use of force. Because communism does not work unless there is use of force. It's a self-defeating
Obviously, yeah.
philosophy, right? So that would be one thing that they would have to be very wary of. And in a sense, I think you would find out that socialism which is basically communist light, and communism, they're both self-defeating. They wouldn't work without massive amounts of force.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a good lesson for people to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if only they taught about it in schools.
Don't get me started on the education system.
Oh yeah, I mean
Ooh.
my kids were my kids who are now homeschooled
Yeah.
were they were asking me, it's like, so Dad, did you learn anything about the Soviet Union in school? I was like, oh yeah. I mean, when I was in school, it was still a thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know,
I,
it didn't break up until I was in high school, and so yeah, we of course heard all about it. But how quickly that got swept away because they didn't hear more than like a mention or two. And these guys, they were horrible.
mhm.
They were at least they were as bad as the Nazis.
Oh yeah. Oh
But
yeah. It's basically, and you're gonna have that history book. Well, actually, it's all the same thing. It's all authoritarianism.
right,
It is top down. We are going to force people to conform to our image, how we want the world to be, and yeah, it all stems from the same thing, just with
yeah,
different flavors, but it's all the same. It's all the same skittle in the end.
pretty much. Now, uh, Red's been throwing lots of different questions in
Ooh,
the chat here. And
okay.
first of all, Red, before you showed up, we covered the hookers and blow angle.
Mm.
The focus of the LP on boats and hose. We covered
Oh
that.
man,
and yes, that's dumb.
it
Stop
is
it.
dumb. It
Stop it.
is.
Stop it now.
If
And
they were, yeah, if Joe or even Spike, and Spike's a smart guy.
I
Um,
don't who is Spike? I don't know who Spike
Spike
is.
Cohen, the VP.
I I'll be honest, I don't pay any attention to the Libertarian Party
Oh,
itself because
you are
be,
among the majority there.
precisely because they precisely because they do stupid things like worry about hookers and blow.
Yeah. Well, and that's such a peripheral thing because
Mm,
it's all tertiary that
yeah,
stems from ownership, having agency. And why couldn't they have said, "Hey, that's a really great question about that. Let's talk about agency and how you own yourself and, go that way." But no, they went full on, "No, under libertarian, everybody
right.
gets to shoot up."
Yeah,
Whee!
yay.
Oh,
um
yeah.
so and that actually gets to something before we get into a couple of these specific questions. It strikes me that libertarianism really works better less as a party than it does as a philosophy. And in there's an analog, which is distributism.
Okay.
It's think of distributism as sort of I think it's fair to consider it sort of socialism light, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I was very into for a while. And its end goal and goal, its model, I should say,
Yep.
is a better way to put it. Is basically everybody should at least have 3 acres and a cow, so they can fend for themselves, and live a life and live their lives how they want to from there.
Yeah.
Um, and basically everything should be distributed insofar as at least you have that, at least everybody's got that, and it'll be great. Of course, there's no good way to get here from there, but in libertarianism is similar in that it does think that the goal is for everybody has enough so that they can get by on their own according to their own devices without the rules. But obviously there's a difference there, that there is no mechanism by which one would say, okay, you have this much, you have this much, you have this. Obviously that doesn't exist in libertarianism. But the
Yeah.
point is that distributism works as like, yes, this should be like something that we have in the back of our minds,
Mm-hmm.
that it would be great if everybody had this. Whereas
Yes. Oh.
libertarianism also, it would be great if we want this in our minds as we go about setting up our as we go about setting up a government at everything, or changing a government, as the case may be. And this is what we want. However,
Yeah.
we get from here to there is a whole nother question.
Sure. And on that, I would say I would love it if my dog never scooted on the carpet. But the thing
Yes,
is, that's in his nature. He's going to do that. So part of the unreality
exactly.
is not everybody would want 3 acres and a cow. Like,
Right.
they want to live in a city. And so the person that has 3 acres and a cow can all of a sudden make money selling food to the person who lives in the city. There's
Right.
that trade of goods.
Yep.
I don't know that one of the reasons libertarians don't do well in politics is we don't play team sports. Like we're just not team sport players. And
Naturally.
Correct. Republican, Democrat, it's a team sport. It is no longer about the good of
Yeah.
people. It's about winning the game. And as
It's
we've seen
exactly
in
what the founders were afraid of with political parties.
exactly winning by any means necessary. So it's tough to tell people when they've had this quote unquote safety net of federal government to say freedom could be so much. You could have There could be so much more if you had the freedom to work for it. The problem is, people are more and more content with lower quality standards of life, and then two, not everybody's going to have 2 acres and a cow, and that's something that libertarians tend to be very realistic about. There will be poverty. There's going to be
Right.
inequality. That is how the world has been since humanity began, and there is no amount of social structuring that's going to change that. Communism won't switch it. Socialism won't switch it. And we've seen that played out in history time and time again. There
Mm-hmm.
will always be inequality. Under a truly free society, that inequality is far less. And this is where you have community organizations like churches, like schools, like
Mm-hmm.
charities that teach, I'm a religious person. And so, as part of our religion, we are taught to feed the poor, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction. Like that is part of our religion, is taking care of the less
Right.
fortunate, and it's
Yep.
something that we do voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
If we have more money in our pockets to do that, we can help people in our community to a greater extent,
Mm-hmm.
and we can begin to teach other people and say, here's our message of something you can choose to do.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, government is saying, we're going to point a gun at your head. We're going to take care of the poor. And they do a terrible job at it.
And they do a
We're going
terrible
to,
job,
and
and
yeah,
they're doing a terrible job of it. Also decreases our ability to do a better job of it. Not just
exactly.
not just because what's commonly thrown out is the idea that, well, people just expect government to do it, so individual people are less likely to do it, which is true. But
To an extent,
even
we still
even
do. Like we're
oh yeah,
very,
we still do. We still
yeah,
do. But and the part that people tend to not realize, and this comes with having a little bit of biblical literacy, is everybody knows that the common church tithe is 10%. That's literally what tithe means. Is
right.
you give 10% of your income. Well, problem is, back in the Old Testament days, that 10% covered everything. That was all of your tax. That covered the church. That covered the government. Literally covered everything, right?
Right. Well,
That
yeah, when you're living under a theocracy, yes.
yes, but my point being that was that 10% tithe was literally everything that you gave. That was your charity. That was your government. That was your church. The whole 9 yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Modern government takes, depending on your income, let's just let, let's
35%.
let's just say roughly 30%
Yeah.
of your income before you even see it.
and once you die, they take it, and you're gonna, yeah, it. So
Yeah,
right. So government always will. They are their biggest competition is God. They want to be God. They want to remake man in their own image. In Old Testament, if we're going to start talking Bible, we saw this with the Tower of Babel, and this is what happened. People wanted to be like God, build a stairway to the heavens, to shake their fist at whatever was in there and say, see, we can reach you. Human nature does not change. And that's why, libertarian philosophy, we want that government to be as small as humanly possible. And if you go a couple steps further into anarchy, they're like, none whatsoever. And honestly, if I lived in an anarchist society, I would probably get along very well. That's just not my personal philosophy.
Yeah, and let's face it, it's probably fairly unrealistic because there's going to be some sort of collective action because there's always one just human nature. There is going to be politics. We didn't start forming groups because somebody made us form groups.
Right.
We started forming groups naturally because
we're communal
that's what
people.
We do.
Yeah, we're communal creatures. Yeah,
exactly. And there will always be the strong who want to take advantage of the weak. Correct. Which is exactly why there is any sort of collective anywhere for anything. Is basically whether it's a tribe or whether it's a union.
Right.
It's essentially to protect weak from strong, to protect the weak from the strong, and usually because they're following somebody who is strong themselves.
Right.
Is usually how that gets started, at least.
Yeah, and then when you get the bad strong guy leading the group, then it's cyclical. It goes over and over. Yep. People 1,000 years from now will be having the same conversation.
Absolutely, and there's no doubt about that. Nothing new under the sun, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
Okay. Getting back to a couple of more specific questions.
Yeah.
So, what, pray tell, would you say the libertarian position on borders is, especially as relating to America being a welfare state, and a lot of libertarians will argue for open borders and say essentially that there shouldn't be borders, not that any of that matter at any rate.
Yeah. So the tough part about that question is it has to do with the welfare state, and in a perfect libertarian society, there would be no welfare state. Like our money is not getting taken from us against our head. Historically, when, in America first started all the way through, think of the stories of Ellis Island, and we had an influx of immigrants, and many of them, like, we forget, the Italians were hated at the time. Irish at the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were seen as the scum of the earth. And so they came in, but they were very industrious. They worked hard, and all, they made America a better place. So this idea that immigration automatically hurts America is, I think, a bad interpretation of history.
And I agree completely.
There's this great book. I'm a foodie. I love foodie. There's this great book about the history of Italian food in America. Italian cooking. I got to travel Italy, and let me tell you, Italian food, other than their gelato, is kind of rubbish. I didn't like it when I was over there. And every time I would eat some pasta dish, I'm like, Americans do Italian better than Italians do. So
I've heard that, actually.
Yeah. So the history behind it, all the men came to America to work, much like in Texas. We see a lot of like Latino, usually from Mexico. They come to work in Texas, and then they send money back home, and eventually their wives and children come join them. So this is what Italians did. And when they got rich enough that their wives could afford to come over, all of a sudden their wives could cook, but they had all of the plenty and bounty that a free market America had to give. And that's when we started getting multiple cheeses in our dishes, because they could choose from it. They, like, all of the produce, all of a sudden we had like phenomenal Italian. So tell me that Italian cooking does not make America a better place. I will.
Same with Mexican, man. Dude, there are two great things that immigrants have brought to this country: is pizza and tacos. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And and all of it comes in. The interesting part is we eventually, it's not that we lose our identity, because all of us, we have, our identities change, from one generation to the next. Your kids are not going to carry on every single tradition that your family does. They're
Mhm.
going to get married to someone, and then those two traditions mingle. And that's what happens with when other cultures come in. You find new and wonderful ways to connect. The problem is when you have the welfare state and all of a sudden there's animosity. Well, this group doesn't pay taxes and now I have to support them.
Right.
And that's where you get a lot of the issue, is that welfare. You get the welfare, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that welfare mentality.
No,
I hope I answered Red's question.
I, I more or less, I think. Um,
So libertarians would be
so
pro. Oh,
basically,
right.
so would you say like flat out open borders, or and by open borders, I define your terms, right? Um, Open borders basically means there is no checkpoint. There
Yes.
is no processing in of immigrants whatsoever. It's just you come and go back and forth. Um, it's just if there is a border, it's a line on a map.
Yeah. So I would, I would be more in favor of that than having a strong, when you get to the border, you have to prove something to come in, because then all of a sudden someone has to decide what what's the criteria to enter. And I'm not comfortable, I'm not comfortable with anybody but me deciding, and I don't want to go down there and sift people. So I would rather them come in. And the thing is, people who want to work and make it, they're going to come up here and
Mm.
work and make it. And those that don't, if they know there's no safety net for them, they're probably not going to leave whatever safety net of family or community they have somewhere else. Yes, you will have criminals, you will have things happen, but we have that already. Um,
That's
and we've
true.
got really strong checkpoints. We've already got cartels that are, fully set up in Breaking Bad style. It's just, there's no way to stop bad people from doing bad, but I would rather not limit good people from doing good to stop bad people from doing bad.
I get your argument. I do disagree here.
Mm-hmm.
I do think having a strong, secure border is a good thing, and that's good for any country. Because I mean, there are differences between countries. There are
Oh yeah,
differences
yeah, for sure.
in culture, in laws. Even if every country was a relatively libertarian country, there would still be differences in culture and law.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and I think being able to at least partially control, at least somewhat control the flow, and at least make the bad people work for it, uh, is is a good thing. That said, I do share your opinion when it comes to being fundamentally pro-immigration. I
Right.
have no I have no interest in saying in being super strict on limiting people. I do think
Yeah.
I'm open to discussions on exactly what criteria would be.
Mm-hmm.
However, um, it is also undeniable that immigration overall has been a very good thing for the country.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because of the fact that America is, while being a physical country, obviously, is also, as Chesterton said, it's a country founded on a creed. It's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And there are Americans all over the world who just had the misfortune to not be born here.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
eagerly welcome every single one of those Americans that was born somewhere else into
Yep.
this country.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could wave my magical libertarian wand and bring them all over here, I
Well,
would.
like all the
Uh,
protesters in Hong Kong who are more excited about America than a lot of Americans are. You know what? You've seen the meme going
Trade.
around. Let's make a trade.
Let's
All the
make a
Antifa
trade.
guys with their commie flags can
That's
go to
right.
Hong Kong. So all the guys in Hong Kong with American flags can come here, and
Yep.
boom, we're all happier.
Exactly. We are all happier. You can just segment, rather than segment by race. Go ahead and segment by belief system.
Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd be thrilled with that. It's like you know what, Hong Kong, you know what, you're my kind of people. You come
Go
over
for
here.
it.
You
Yeah.
guys are Portland. You suck. Get
Hmm.
over there.
Now, see,
And
as we have borders set up right now, the
yeah.
people from Hong Kong cannot come over here because they're, all of the visa requirements and everything going in.
Mhm.
We have it locked down so much that I would say, I would rather it be free enough for them to come in.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but again, if we're talking about libertarian fantasy land, nobody's getting welfare from a
Right.
state. Like, all of that is controlled through churches, private organizations, charities, and they would be able to control who gets what more. And if we did have open borders, I imagine we would see pockets of communities that were more pro or anti, quote unquote, outsider. And that sounds harsh, but again, in a libertarian society, you're free to be a jerk. You're also free
Right.
to be open, and I think the market would make fewer jerks and more open people. But I totally understand people that have more of your mindset on it.
Mm.
Um, like I understand it. It's just where I personally fall on it is I would rather have something that is freedom oriented with the possibility of bad things happening rather than more locked down oriented and bad things still happen.
And honestly, and I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think that's honestly, I think that's a fair and honest disagreement. Especially, I mean, and we're both still in the same place as far as like, if you're with me, come on over.
yeah, yeah,
if you're
exactly,
if you're somebody who was born an American in India, I want you here.
exactly.
And that's
Yeah,
just you know how we quibble about over how to make that happen. Okay, fine. We can quibble over that and argue about those details. That's fine.
right, right.
We're coming from essentially the same place. Um, Now, of course, there's another big one that read throughout a while ago, and it's just one word: abortion.
Oh, yeah. So I am vehemently pro-life. Um, the science is incredibly clear on this. Life begins at conception.
Right.
And I talked to a medical personnel one time about this when I was kind of waffling on the issue, because technically, there's that verse in the Bible that says the life of the flesh is in the blood. Blood
Mm.
cells don't form until about 18 days into conception. And I said, so why do Christians tend to believe in life at conception? And she said, well, what else can it be? When you have a
Yeah.
fertilized egg, there is nothing else. The potential of it is life. Once there is conception and once there is life, that life is given all of the same protections as any of us are. It is a separate body. It is a
Hmm.
separate set of
Yeah.
cells. It is separate DNA. There's everything separate about it. Um, that it that it is in a human and growing and needing that protection does not give anyone the right to end that life. In the same
Right.
way, if you have an infant, you have to feed them, you have to change them, you have to take care of them. And just because they are completely dependent on you doesn't give you the right to commit infanticide
Right.
on an infant that's out there. It's a little more convenient when you can't see the features and it's just, it's just something inside you that's getting sucked out through a
But
tube.
the principle is no different.
The principle is no different. You cannot
Yeah.
violate the NAP against an unborn human at any stage.
No. Well, there you go. And thank you.
Yeah,
I
you're welcome.
figured that would be your answer from having
So
followed you for a bit, but
the other thing that I usually get when I have this conversation with
yeah.
people who are more in some aspect they're on the abortion scale, the one big thing is, well, what about rape? A child conceived by rape. It is an unfortunate travesty whoever raped should be punished to the absolute max.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually, well, I won't get into that. However it happened, it is an unfortunate thing in life, and we just, as humans, we have to know bad things happen to good people,
Mm-hmm.
because when bad people do bad things, then good people suffer. That's just a fact of life, but that doesn't mean that you're justified in killing the life that's there. Now, um, there are what am I trying to say? Charities, organizations, even now, that specialize in adoption for this kind of thing. And I think
Right.
there would be a ton more if this ever became a problem. Now, statistically, this is a very rare
Very, very
thing,
small thing.
very small to have,
Yeah.
a child from a rape. But even when it comes to the unwed mother that, made a mistake, like, um, I understand being scared. I understand that. I don't think that a female should be punished for, you know, getting an abortion, because typically there's a lot of coercion going on behind the scenes, where it's either the boyfriend, it's the parent, it's something that's going after it. You're under duress. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
stress going into it. The person that should be punished would be the doctor or the healthcare professional providing it, because
And I
they're
agree.
clear and sound mind performing that procedure. And in my case, that is murder.
No, I would agree that because the pro-abortion crowd came up with this, genius tactic a couple of years ago of asking pro-lifers, so how long should the mother go to jail for? And most of us are like, nobody said that the mom should go to jail. Actually,
I hate those questions.
I want the so-called doctor to go to jail. That's who I want to go to jail.
Right. Yeah. And again, there are, like, there's even a clinic here in Dallas. It's run by a church. Top-notch medical care. Anybody who's coming in, they can get free pregnancy help from beginning all the way to the end, and they will help find that child a good home. So, that no longer becomes an excuse. And again, for those of us who love life and want to protect it, we would see these pop up all over the place. Give us a chance. The problem is, they want the abortion industry, goodness, like, they snag them in places that we're not allowed to go. Schools, Christians can't go in schools and say, hey, if you mess up around prom and you find yourself in a bad situation, let me tell you about this. Or we're not allowed to do that. Now, Planned Parenthood can go into a school and say, nobody needs to know. Come in the back door, and there you go.
Right.
So, in a fair fight, I think the pro-life side is winning. More and more people, as the science comes out, are pro-life, and we've been able to do it with a hand tied behind our back.
And it's forcing the pro-abortion crowd to be more honest about how they really feel about it, because I've noticed the last few years, most of them, not most, I shouldn't say that. I've noticed more of them saying, yeah, it's a life, I don't care.
Yeah, they've now had to come out and be real about the ghouls that they are. And every time Planned Parenthood puts out a tweet, it's almost immediately ratioed, and I could not be happier. Like,
Amen, hallelujah.
It's a child. It's just despicable what they do to it. But yeah, that's my stance, and I believe consistent with libertarian philosophy on life.
And I would agree with literally everything you said on that subject. So, now I would, of course, now we're actually coming up on the hour, which is where I normally end this, but I would be remiss if I did not ask you about the whole thing going on with big tech right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because, obviously, if people have been living under a rock and or you missed by live stream yesterday, Twitter has gone in, and actually just about every social media platform on the planet has now banned the still, for the next 2 weeks, sitting president of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
from their platforms, and not just his personal account. They're deleting tweets now from the POTUS account. Yeah,
Whoa. See, I didn't even
yeah,
know that. Okay.
yeah. I just found that out today, and have apparently been banning all kinds of right-wing accounts just across the board. Everybody's talking about how they got followers that are just completely disappearing.
Same here. Yeah, I
And
lost followers.
yep, I noticed a handful, but then I noticed they kind of came back up. So I don't know what's up with that. Even though I haven't been getting the notifications that so and so followed you very
Mm-hmm.
much. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But I suspected Twitter of doing some sort of shadow banning type stuff with my account for a little while now, just based on certain things that get traction, certain things that don't.
Right.
But and then they kicked it up a notch. Oh, and also, I mean, it went to, at least as far as Trump goes, like Shopify banned any and all Trump affiliated companies from working with them.
Ooh.
Yep. And now apparently Google and Apple both have banned Parler from their app stores.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So here we are in a situation. You've got the big tech social media companies going, you get to talk, you get to talk, you get to talk, not you, not you, not you, not you, not you, not you. Go build your own platform. Oh wait, no, we just nuked your platform.
Yeah.
And we've seen warning signs of this before, and I went over to this a little bit in my show yesterday with, if you remember back to the Sargon of Akkad thing,
Mm-hmm.
where he got kicked off of, it might have been Patreon, it might have been YouTube, might have been all of it,
Yeah.
because of some things that he said on another platform. But it went worse than that. Like, you had payment processors and everything, MasterCard, PayPal, putting pressure on, I think it was like even Subscribestar or other places, saying, if you allow this guy on your platform, you don't get to work with us.
Mm-hmm.
So this gets right into the heart, frankly, of libertarian philosophy, because the typical libertarian would say, okay, well, Twitter, Facebook, what have you, private company, they can set the rules, they can do it, enforce them however they wish, they can do what they want. Now, generally speaking, I would agree with that. However, we find ourselves in a situation where they're not only all working together to control speech in the way, to control and manipulate things the way that they want. It's also a situation where they're literally colluding to prevent you from literally making an alternative.
Right.
This I find to be a massive problem, and a comment that I've made is, there's too many libertarians who are, well, I don't want to say that just yet, because I don't want to load you too heavy.
Yeah.
You go right ahead with what you think about this.
Right. So if Google and Twitter and all the other ones were truly a private company, I would say you get to do whatever you want. However, they've gotten in bed with the government. They've been in bed for a long time with them. There is also, when they, oddly enough, all of the people that are going to chair this new division to oversee social media are all Democrats. And that's
Weird.
going to then that's going to happen as soon as Joe Biden takes his place. So oddly enough, in an act of self-preservation, they sort of go ahead and enforce the rules that everybody knows the Democrats are going to want. We stifle all speech that we don't want to. So in
Yep.
that sense, I would say Twitter, Google, there's a bit of coercion there, which all of a sudden means that they're not entirely a private company. It's a lot the same way of these local businesses that are trying to enforce a mask mandate.
Mm-hmm.
During a flu season, they're never going to enforce a mask mandate.
Of
They're not
course
going to
not.
take your temperature when you go in. I went to a new church 2 weeks ago or last week, and they were taking my temperature and all kinds of stuff to get in there, forcing me to wear a mask. I left. And in that case, it's not the church that's doing it. They are being coerced. So Twitter potentially would be more open to free speech if they knew that the force and power of the federal government wouldn't come down on them. It gets a little bit trickier because a place like Twitter or a place like Google could probably crush the federal government in a heartbeat because, they own everything. They shouldn't be scared of it, except the people who run it have similar political ideologies.
And
In a
see, I don't think
so
they're. I don't think they're afraid of the government coming down on them.
they
I
think
think
it's a good thing,
they
and
they they know that, as you were alluding to, they have a similar ideology as the people that are going to be overseeing them.
yeah, a similar ideology. And I mean, these are tyrants, just like we've seen in history past. They love the control. Now, all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, Jack Dorsey has a seat with the government. You think Jack's not going to go to them at some point and say, "Hey, I want you to create this law so it's harder for another parlor to be invented, or else I'm going to start censoring some of your senators for hate speech." That we can, like, social media is media. They can twist public opinion just as
Yes, they
much as
can.
they want. Google is the same way. Oh, it would be a shame for our search results to kind of preclude any any information on this. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone's trying to get their own piece of the pie. It's this uber strong authoritarian central. So do I like what they're doing? No. But again, the only reason they can do what they're doing right now is because we have our government on all levels is too powerful. It has too much control over our personal lives. You get a presidency that's basically volunteer, there to make sure that no powers, foreign or domestic, violates our rights, and there's no power in a place like Twitter or Google to do that. And another platform like Parler could pop up more easily. Right now, I guarantee you, pretty soon there's going to be new rules and regulations for any social media platform,
They
and
will.
it's gonna
Oh yeah.
and it's gonna be pretty tough for another Facebook to be created.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all by design, because Facebook, Twitter, all of them, like crony capitalism has done for years, they are going to influence the laws that serve their company best.
Yeah. Now, for first, as far as what you're saying, those new laws for any new app or whatever that comes out, this is one of the reasons why I'm encouraging people to get on something like Proton Mail, which is encrypted email,
Mm.
or Telegram, which
Oh, yep,
basically is an encrypted, secure app
yep.
for
I got Telegram.
phone
Yeah,
calls, texts. Okay, there you go. It basically ways around these people so you can still stay in touch with all the cool people you met on social media, right?
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and I think we're quickly approaching a future where we're a world where we're going to need that soon.
yes.
Because if there's one thing that I see going on right now is there's it's not just about censoring ideas that they don't like. I
Hmm.
think that's a simplistic way of looking at this, frankly. I think they're literally trying to cut off lines of communication. I think they're trying to prevent um people on the right from being able to communicate and organize
Oh
on
yeah,
the scale that Antifa and BLM has.
yeah.
I
Well,
think that's what this is really about.
and I think that they're just falling into the same trap as other people have historically, and that
Mm-hmm.
is they want the power, they want control. When we did that 15 days to flatten the curve back in March, um,
Oh, those are good days.
I know those were good days. When it first happened, I write music for a living, so I work in an office all by myself. I really was not, in danger of spreading
Right.
anything. But I was like, okay, I'm going to take 15 days off. I had this idea for a book that I wanted to write, so I took the
Uh-huh.
15 days, and that turned into a couple months. And so now I'm working with some editors to try to get this thing out.
Mm-hmm.
And the theme that really, it's technically the prequel to the Nutcracker, like the ballet, but it's more Jason Bourne meets Harry Potter kind of a thing. But the main thrust of it is you have this extremely powerful organization
Mm.
that's beginning to make authoritarian rule, and they stand unopposed except for one person who decides to stand up and say no, and the person is not strong enough to take them on, but they decide to stand up and say no. And in the end, like right now, we have to be planning to have the technology where someone can stand up and say no. I No, I'm not going to. And I think something like Telegram is great, but what happens when Apple says, well, we're not supporting Telegram on our phones? Or
It's
Google
coming.
says we're not. Yeah, it's coming. But there's an American company who's starting to make telephones. They're great phones. They're expensive, but great phones. And the whole thing is it's secure. They don't use none of the parts are manufactured in China. It's all here local. Little companies like that, I think it's time for us to start preparing, like,
Seeking them out and supporting
yeah,
them.
let's
Yeah.
seeking them out, support them, people who are planning, giving us the tools, because there will be a time where liberty loving people are going to have to communicate and say, I can't buy anything in my city unless I've got, all the right papers, and getting these papers means I have to go against deeply held beliefs. We're going to have to create our own communities. And I sound like one of those tinfoil hat people. And I never wanted to be that guy. But
Well,
honestly,
and
we're
you're
kind of
not
there.
wrong,
Yeah.
because, and one, I think you're right. I think we have to do that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of what's, because I think what we all kind of see coming down the road here, and coming at us, frankly, faster than I ever expected.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a little bit, in a way, it's an answer to one of my follow-ups to the previous big tech question, which is, the whole, I one of the issues that I have with the typical libertarian response to this is, and yours was fine insofar as, like, if it was a more libertarian society, this wouldn't even be a question.
Sure.
However, that doesn't quite answer the question of what do we do in the world we live in.
Oh, yeah.
um
Well, I mean,
you know
in the world we live in, there's
mm,
nothing we can do, because this is big tech that, back when it was a more when it was a more free world, they built this thing and then they went crony. So again, it's bad people doing bad things and good people are suffering for it. Yeah, we could shake our fists and say, no, we want Donald Trump back on Twitter. Or someone could say, well, build your own platform. No, they're making it too difficult to build their own platform. Like, we're given a dumpy response. We have to get creative in how we deal with it. Um, if someone wants to build an entirely new Google
mm.
type whatever, like, I'll write your theme song for you. I don't have any other. I don't
of
have
course
any other
let's
skills.
be honest,
That's
that's harder than building your own Twitter analog is hard.
correct. Correct. So,
Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where all the businesses are, and this is the thing. This actually gets to the comment I was going to make earlier that I held off on, was that there are too many libertarians that are, frankly, that are rightly upset if a government wants to trample on your rights, but are
mhm,
totally fine if a company tramples on your rights.
yeah.
And I do think that there is at least a potential role for a government to say, no, these are natural rights. These are not government rights. They're not business rights. They're natural rights. They exist independently of us and of you. And since you are encroaching on them, we're going to stop you from encroaching on them. Now, obviously, yes, there is. Obviously, that requires a government with a certain level of power that, in other respects, I would not be comfortable with. And I think this whole situation does point to that. When you get down on the ground in certain situations, it's messy. And
Mhm.
in some respect, there has to be a check on everybody. And the businesses are not always going to be a check on each other. Not always, not when they all have the same ideology, not when they're all working together to sort of say, well, we're just going to go ahead and say and crush our competition before they can even get born. And that does put us in the situation that we kind of are right now, where we don't just have to build our own platform. We have to build an entirely new society, an entirely new infrastructure, which no one person can do.
Right.
Which you were kind of alluding to a response to that when you said, well, I'll write your theme song.
Yes. So to that, I would say some of it goes back to platform. And I think eventually the market will fix this eventually. So Twitter, Google has no right, like basically our right to free speech is natural. So it is our natural voice. We get to speak and say whatever we want. Now, we are not free to speak and say whatever we want on any platform. No one could go on my website, my music website, and say whatever they want. I have the freedom to take those comments out. Just, like I own that website. So I would say the natural right to free speech the natural right to free speech ends where someone else's right to private ownership begins. And then we get back to what I said before. Google, Twitter, they're not private companies, not anymore. They have now entered the public arena. They are shaping public policy. They are going to no doubt be shaping public law. And so now Google and Twitter technically should not have the right to they're public now. They don't have the right to censor that stuff under free speech because in the government you get to say whatever you want. That's public. That's where your voice is heard. But someone else could start something that's completely free. Parler, they're not going to be shaping any policy to be sure.
No.
So they have the right to tell whoever they want what they can and can't say, what they can and can't post, because they're completely public. I don't have to download them. I don't have a Parler account. I don't have to download them. I don't have to use them. Same with Google and with Twitter. I can delete all of their products and go elsewhere. It just makes it a little bit tough now because those companies are, through crony means, limiting my ability to make a free choice. And that's where it's criminal. That's where I think they should be stomped.
Nope, I would agree with that. And I would also throw out, they've got to keep the rules, one, easy to follow, easy to understand, and not constantly change them. The whole thing has been, a big part of the argument has been, well, are you a publisher or are you a platform?
Sure.
If you're a platform, you don't get to censor everybody. If you're a publisher, whatever you want, that's fine.
Sure.
And they've largely presented themselves as platforms, which then no, I'm sorry. At least according to current law, you don't get to just censor everybody.
Sure. But and that was one of the things. You remember when Obama was being grilled about the health care? Is it a penalty or is it a tax? And his answer always shifted depending on who was asking the question. And sometimes in the same conversation, it's a penalty. No, it's a tax because I'm not allowed to tax. Oh, but a penalty sounds so bad. And that's what this whole publisher platform angle, they are getting to bend the rules of what they are when it suits them best. And in a libertarian society, like the rules, when you make the rules there, you don't get to break the rules.
They would essentially be a breach of contract.
Correct. It would be a breach of contract. If you have contracted and saying, the terms of service are, when you're on here are the parameters. Okay, if I didn't break those parameters, you don't get to arbitrarily silence me unless you renegotiate that contract with me. But as it is, they want their cake. They want to eat it too. And the government, the government, oh man, right now the government must feel oh so smart and powerful because they're like, oh, we've got Google and Twitter on our side. But what they don't realize is they have just sold their soul to Satan, and big tech is going to make them pay. This is going to be, let them fight. This is going to be
Oh, it is.
Godzilla.
It isn't even going to be that because I mean, right now, right now, literally, it's the social media companies that are running things. They
Okay, can
basically
you?
control what's on the news.
Oh
They're
yeah.
literally silencing the president of the United States, and
And imagine
they
when
control what we
Google
see. I mean,
and
it's insane.
right, and imagine when a Google employee or someone hacks the search history of some of those senators.
Uh huh.
Like they they're probably going to be sending screenshots and saying, "Boy, it'd be a shame if this got out there. You're looking at some pretty weird stuff right there."
Nice hookers and blow you got there. It'd be a shame if everyone knew about it.
Exactly. Yeah, and half the Libertarian Party would be like, "Come join us." Um, like, yeah, big tech is going to own them, and government is so stupid. They're so bad at everything. Right now, they think they've got the upper hand, and what they don't understand is all of their automated systems run on the technology that this company created. I believe we are going towards a one world government. It will happen probably within our lifetime.
That
And
scares the piss out of me.
yeah, big tech seems to be the perfect way to make that happen. Um, I think that's the perfect way to make it happen, and America just accepted a major loss to them.
Yeah, yeah. This is gonna be. It's gonna be bad.
Yeah.
It's gonna be really, really bad. And I don't know. Frankly, I don't know how much longer all these different platforms are going to be available to people like us. Even like the Protons and the Telegrams and everything. Eventually, those apps will get nuked from the stores.
Or they will have to sign over, like all of a sudden they won't
Or they'll be
be.
compromised. Yeah,
Yeah, they'll be
one or the other.
compromised.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one or the other. Or they'll have just it's not gonna work. Even if they're net, or they might even get nuked straight off of our phones. I wouldn't be shocked if one day, a month from now, I open up my phone and I'm gonna send my brother an email through Proton, and there's nothing there.
Yeah,
It's like
error
where'd
404,
that
server
app
not
go?
found. Yeah.
I would
No,
not be surprised at all.
I would not be surprised either. And we might all have to start, like, actually congregating in person to form these communities. It might send us back to the dark ages.
It is.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's the I haven't made that analogy publicly yet, but it's what's been in my mind.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of back to the dark ages, but these are going to be actual dark ages because you don't want to get me started on what the dark ages actually were.
Right.
They actually weren't all that dark for the most part, or at least not
Yeah.
nearly as dark as they are portrayed.
Right. Yeah, it depends on if you like that dystopian historical fantasy fiction. No, I was a history minor in college, and Dark Ages, like that period, was one of my favorite eras to study because there were a lot of advancements. It was so very controlled, and education was so tightly,
Mhm.
given to just a certain class of people. But yeah, I think, without putting my tinfoil hat on, I think that's what's coming up. I can see it happening. I'm trying to plan for it as best I can,
Yeah.
but in the end, we are all going to have to gather around our communities,
Yep.
find like-minded people, and hope that some of the brown shirts don't turn us in when we start trading goods and services.
Yeah. No kidding, right?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, yeah, we should take advantage of what's available
Hmm.
while it's available to be able to trade, share information, um, you know, for help each other start to form those more local communities because
Yeah.
we might need remote help to form something local just because
Hmm.
we might not know how. Or
Yeah.
it might turn out that somebody we're friends with 500 miles away happens to know somebody with a very similar philosopher to us who lives down the street,
Right.
but who we might never come into contact with through normal means.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm a musician by trade. I would be fairly useless in that capacity during an apocalypse kind of a thing. So I've started learning woodworking. I'm learning how joinery. I'm learning, different techniques. again, I enjoy doing it. It's a fun pastime, but it's also useful. And
Uh-huh.
for people out there that tend to be a bit more cynical about the direction the world is going, you might want to find an area that's useful post-apocalypse and practice a little bit.
Absolutely. Well,
How could it hurt?
having met you, Paul, you're not a small guy, so
No.
you're welcome in my bunker.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
And not to mention, I mean, when it comes down to it, one of the things that I remember from some of my reading is that is stuck in my mind is John Paul II when he was just merely Karol Wojtyła. Even before he was Father Karol Wojtyła, he was a theater person. He was a creative individual, and he was athletic, but that's beside the point. One of the things that he and his friends did during the Nazi and then the communist occupation of Poland was they had literally an underground theater troupe. It was an illegal theater and musical organization that would go and do private performances of plays and music in people's homes. They would do things for an audience of a family.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was to try to preserve Polish culture, which the Nazis and the commies were both trying to stamp out.
Go ahead.
And that is an example that we're going to need to keep in mind, I think, in the coming future. This is something that I've been saying to my kids a lot. That it's not all about it's not all about being able to survive in the woods and having your AR-15 with 25,000 rounds. It's about being able to preserve, create, and perpetuate a culture.
Right.
And we're going to need those people.
Yeah, I was interviewed, I guess this would have been last week or a week before last, I forget. Someone was asking about libertarian in the arts, some professionally in the arts. And they said, what would you tell artists now? And the thing I said was, back in the day, artists used to give the middle finger to the government all the time. Every time we started a war, you had these really great war anthems, and then we kind of got soft. So when George Bush started this infernally long war that we kind of find ourselves in, the only group that made any sort of like top 20 anti-war was Green Day. Like, that's all we have to show for this, last anti-war.
Right.
But now we're in the lockdown. I was fortunate enough to get a job in a theater, like the only theater in America that stayed open to do live performances. And I was really sad. I was like, artists, we're supposed to be anti-establishment naturally. So I am encouraging people now. It doesn't matter what your local ordinances are or what's going on. Have those performances, and just tell people you are assuming risk when you come here, because every time a government has come down on artists are creative when they need to be, and it never turns out well for the government, just historically speaking. So that's where I'm telling artists, it's time for you to say, you know what, you don't get to tell me what to do. Art must exist. And that's one way that we can kind of fight back. Because we're artists. Like, all we know how to do is snap fight in West Side Story. It's not like we're gonna be actually pulling out guns.
Honestly,
but we can tell a story.
And honestly, for those who are more inclined to throw the punch or to pull the trigger, whatever, we need the stories. Those people are inspired by stories.
Yes.
Very often. And those stories are told by the creative people who are, maybe they're behind the lines, but those people make it possible for the people on the front lines to be there.
Correct. They inspire the masses. And
exactly.
A good story told well can inspire people to serve something higher than themselves. And
as I say, the pen is mightier than the sword, and for good reason that phrase exists.
The pen is mightier than the sword. Yes, it is. It is, and that's why I believe I believe a good story is so much more powerful than people give it credit for. You can sway hearts and minds, and outside of my religious leanings, where I would say the highest thing you could serve is Christ. From a political standpoint, I think the highest aspiration is liberty.
There you go. And I think that's a perfect note to end things on, Paul.
Love
So
it.
I want to really thank you for coming on. I'm glad we could finally make this work out. We're going to have to do
Love
it
it.
again. And I
Please
would
do.
actually love to actually spend more time talking about your creative endeavors because
Yeah.
for those who, if you don't know Paul is an insanely creative individual. He writes, he does music, he acts. Basically, if you name it and it's creative, he was probably at least dabbled in it. And I would love to actually just spend some time talking about that because that's something I'm going to be working on, making more of a focus on the show is promoting people who create things.
That's awesome.
Because again, that's something we're going to need in the times to come. It's not all about being able to build the perfectly defensible bunker. It's about being able to have a culture that's worth fighting for.
Right.
And so again, Paul, thank you very much. Before we go, is there anything you would like to promote here as we head out the door?
So if you want to check me out on YouTube, my channel is PT Superman, like part-time Superman. Most of it on there is religious music, but I do have a lot of secular music. If you know someone who's looking for music that's from moderately advanced to advanced in one of those settings, and send them my way every time. It always helps. And then pretty soon I'll be making an announcement when my book gets published. We'll have to do a follow-up.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
actually.
I'm hoping within the next 2 or 3 months to be able to present Drosselmeyer, Curse of the Rat King, to the world.
I so want to read this book. I really do. And honestly, don't you dare send me a free copy. Just let me know where I can buy it.
Oh yeah, no. I will have all of that mapped out. But definitely, we will need to chat.
Okay, awesome. Well, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I will not be here next week. I'll be out in the woods with my brother, just enjoying some peace and quiet. But I will be back the following week with Brian Niemeyer. And if you missed it last night, we're going to be talking about his argument that we're getting as gaslit on Pope Francis as we are on anything else, and he's not the super commie that you think he is. He makes some interesting points, and I'm curious to hear more. It should be a very interesting conversation. So until 2 weeks from now, ladies and gentlemen, keep fighting the good fight.